All right, everybody, welcome to the Thursday episode of Locked On NHL. We are now in a regular season when it comes to a brand new NHL season, and therefore we are back with the power rankings. We were doing some power rankings over the offseason. Who could win trophies? Who could win, or best coach in the league and power ranking everything. But we are back to every Thursday, week in, week out, power ranking NHL teams 1 to 32. How you feeling this year, Denker? You're liking what we're presenting this year, or what?
Presenting what exactly in terms of what the quality of talent that is out there in the NHL this year,
Well,
or
yeah, I was doing Locked On Avalanche, obviously, and Kyle and I and Jack from Locked On Blackhawks, we did a crossover and just on Wednesday, and we did the crossover, talked about two teams, obviously, and then we kind of like made our official predictions, all three of us. And the one thing that I was saying was like, I want to see more closeness in the standings in the East. Like the East is very strong, but it's very top heavy. And you knew who the playoff teams were going to be by Christmas time.
yeah,
You know what I mean? So, and then at the end of the year, if I'm not mistaken, I believe it was the Bruins who were the second wild card. Is that right? I'm pretty
yes,
sure.
yes, yes,
And
yes.
then the drop off to who was next to them, again, I'm pretty sure was Detroit, and it was like 25-point difference between them and them making a wild card. So yeah, I mean, like what we're presenting this year, do you think we're gonna have more of I think the teams might be more of the same in the East, but you think we're going to see better races for some of these wild card spots this year with some of these teams improving, like Ottawa. And, Buffalo's going to be better, but I don't think they're going to be in a playoff spot, or the Devils, or what, all the teams that missed out. Should they be a little bit closer than they were last year?
I would hope so. It definitely makes our lives easier here on the show. Talking about the same 16 teams all year long,
Yeah,
but
man. Yeah.
I mean, but I a team that, and I guess this is a good way to start the conversation. I think there's a lot of talent out there distributed evenly among the teams for the most part. One team that I really thought was gonna, we were gonna see some sort of, fire from them right on is Columbus. And granted, yeah, Carolina's a good team. They were one of the best teams last year in the East, and Blue Jackets could only get one goal out there, and they lose Line for 3 or 4 weeks now. So
Yeah.
I think that's the one thing when we're looking at the collection of talent in a lot of these teams. It's you got the players, Columbus, again, to use them as an example. You got the two-headed monster in net, and you got Gaudreau and Line, but can these guys play together? And that's always the big thing that we always talk about. I mean, we spoke about it last year with Vegas, getting Jack Eichel. Can these guys, this group of superstars, and I think the best case study has been Toronto. Can these guys play together and be
Mhm.
successful on the ice? And that's going to be a question we're going to be asking ourselves all season long.
Definitely will be. But I mean, to answer my own question, I think we will. I think we'll have a little bit more of a closer race when it comes to these divisions and these wild card spots and these division spots. I say that in kind of meaning I don't think it's going to be cut and dry by Christmas or the New Year. When the teams that are in, and all that's remaining for them is just seeding.
Mhm.
But outside of those playoff teams, it was just there was nothing going in the East. And yeah, for us, when we do the power rankings, at one point in time, it just was stagnant. Like nothing was. You had the movement in the top, and the bottom just remained the same
Yeah.
for half the year. So I just want to see that. I want to see teams go on runs, and I think there's more skill on those bottom teams in the East that can do that from time to time. So I'm
Yeah.
looking forward to that. And then what do you think in the West? We'll talk about the West quickly, and then if you're watching on YouTube, we'll bring up the graphic for our opening week power rankings. But your thoughts on the West?
I mean, we had, just to recap last year, we had a couple of teams that were really surprisingly good. I don't think anybody really expected the seasons that the Ducks and the Kings had, and hopefully that continues, and hopefully the Kraken get better,
Yeah.
hopefully see a little bit more production from Vegas just for, just purpose of having some sort of, competitiveness down the stretch. Hopefully we just see all the teams continue to improve. A team that I loved and enjoy watching last year was Dallas, and I think that they're poised to take a big step this year. I mean, you're obviously more familiar with the West than I am. I mean, when you're, especially now that you're the Stanley Cup champions, congratulations.
We are. Thank you.
I made a comment to
Appreciate that.
someone the other day, saying it feels weird not starting the first episode of the season by
Does it?
talking about our banner raising.
Oh,
But
does it? Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. I
uh,
can talk about it if you want me to, but
yeah, go ahead, go ahead.
no, I think the West is kind of similar to that, where I think the East has improved on those bottom teams. Sure, there's some in the West that have. Seattle will be interesting. I think they're one of those teams that will be improved. Will they be enough to grab a wild card spot or even a top 3 spot? I don't think so. That's the beauty of hockey. You got to play it. And then, yeah, those teams, there was a little bit of movement, obviously, with Kadri going to Calgary, and all the moves that Calgary made. How powerful are they? And Vegas will be interesting. Are they going to miss out again? I think a lot of people are thinking they might. They're one of those fringe teams. So you mentioned Anaheim. I don't know, like, we asked that question so many times last year. Do you remember?
Yeah.
Like, because they had such a hot start, and we asked that question: can they sustain this? And it seemed like they were for a while, and then it just like fell off a cliff, and they were done.
Yeah.
So I think I like what they're building there, but I think they're just too young, and they might need a little bit of time. So that's the beauty of an NHL season. There's so many, and Vancouver is another team, which I think we're going to get into when we bring up the power rankings. But why don't we mention Bet Online, and then after that we'll bring up the graphic and we'll kind of go through who our hosts over at Locked On NHL have ranked from 1 through 32. But first, betonline.net. It's your number one source for football betting this season, and of course hockey season, because that just started too. Don't forget about us. Find all the latest player developments, team matchups, news, podcasts, and in-depth articles and analysis on every game that you can find. As always, BetOnline remains your continued source for all of your sport wagering information, with live betting and up-to-the-minute scores for every sport out there. The fastest and easiest way to check in on all of your favorite games and events, including Major League Baseball, MMA, boxing, and golf. Speaking of Major League Baseball, Denker, you doing okay, my man?
We'll talk off camera about that.
I root for him. I root for him. That's fall from grace. It's too bad.
For people who don't know, I'm a Met fan, so I live a life of pain.
Head to betonline.net or use your mobile device to learn more. That's betonline.net, where the game starts. All right, everybody. If you're watching on YouTube, we're going to be bringing up this graphic right there. There's your first week's power rankings. If you're not, and you're listening in your car or at home, we'll go through these. So I usually bring up the top 10 and then kind of we'll nitpick throughout. But your top 10 looks like this. Number 10, the St. Louis Blues. Number 9, the Minnesota Wild. Number 8, the Edmonton Oilers. Number 7, the Florida Panthers. Number 6, the Calgary Flames. Number 5, the New York Rangers. Number 4, the Carolina Hurricanes. Number 3, the Toronto Maple Leafs. And number 2 and number 1 is your Stanley Cup matchup from last year. 2, the Tampa Bay Lightning, and number 1, the Colorado Avalanche. And I know it probably looks like, because we host this show, that our teams are number 1 and number 2. Like I said, everybody votes on this across the board from Locked On NHL. So I was a little surprised the Lightning were at number 2. I think they're definitely a top 5 team, but I thought maybe people are just voting, at least for week 1, your Stanley Cup champion. But give me your overall thoughts, at least in the top 10. We'll start there.
Well, didn't we have this conversation last year, Chris, when we did the rankings? Well, when we
We always
started the
do.
rankings, who just because you play in the Stanley Cup final, do you deserve, unless you have some massive shakeup, do you deserve to be in the top two?
Mm-hmm.
The Lightning, I mean, they're a team where, obviously I may be a little biased in the way I talk about them, but I like to think I'm overly harsh to a certain degree about them. But I feel like this is, and I spoke about this on my show, I think this is, if we're looking at the other 3 years, the other two, well, the past 3 years, Stanley Cup final teams, I think this year's team is probably the weakest of
Mm-hmm.
the bunch. So I was a little shocked when I saw them at two. And our listeners who listen to us a lot on the Thursday slot, no surprise to them. I'm so shocked that the Leafs are up this high.
You're not big on the Leafs, are you?
They have no goaltending this year. They're basing their entire season off of if Matt Murray could stay healthy. And
Well, yeah. I mean, can't you say that about anybody though? If said player can stay healthy, isn't that kind of like a normal thing?
I guess aren't
I
we
know what
just
you mean.
ranking? Yeah, aren't we just also ranking them high because of Austin Matthews,
I mean,
the
would you
reigning
not?
Richard Trophy?
Dude is one of the best players in the league, man.
Wouldn't you have the
I
oil
mean,
on that reasoning? Wouldn't you have the Oilers in the top five because of Connor McDavid, who, by the way, scored a hat trick last night?
he did. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's another team that I thought was maybe a little bit on the low side. They're at number 8 to start the year. A lot of people are. Do you get the impression like everybody's high on the Oilers at the beginning of every season because of that two-headed monster with Draisaitl and McDavid, and then they always have a good regular season,
yeah.
and then things seem to fall apart in the playoffs. But where are you going to put them though? I mean, if they're number 8, you got Florida above them. What do you think about the Flames at 6? I think a lot of people are liking the Flames, and are they where they're supposed to be, or do you feel like they're a top 5 team?
Right now, I like the Flames where they are because so much was made about that trade between them and Florida in the offseason. Huberdeau going up to Calgary, and Kachuk going to Florida, and yeah, it's a big trade. Obviously, Kachuk, one of the young stars still up and coming in the league, coming fresh off his first 100-point season. But if you look at the roster, and you add Kadri to that mix, I mean, the Flames didn't get worse. To say that maybe they got
No.
better, you're gonna have to wait. But yeah, I like them where they are. I have
Mhm.
more of an issue, but if we're, if you want to move them into the top 5, maybe because they do now have a little bit more depth, I guess, if you want to say that from that trade, do you kick the Hurricanes out? I was a little shocked by the
Yeah.
Hurricanes, and I don't know, they just don't strike me as a team that they have a lot of tools. They just don't know how to direct that talent towards really success. They make the playoffs, they make a lot of noise in the Metropolitan, but that's pretty much as far as it goes.
I feel like, and I like the Hurricanes.
Yeah,
And again, on
they're
that show, that was my Stanley Cup final, was the Avalanche and the Hurricanes. But they do have that like Edmonton Oilers East in them.
yeah,
Like they're a very good team. And then once they get to the playoffs, but you can say the same thing about the Maple Leafs, obviously,
yeah,
with the first round struggles that they've had. So a lot of it is, outside of Tampa, who proves that they can make it no matter where they are in the standings,
yeah,
um, because they've made it the past 3 years in a row. All these other teams are like, you got to prove it to us
yeah,
because you haven't proven it so far because Tampa's taken all of you guys out. So
yeah,
until you can prove that and then, overcome that and, other struggles that come throughout the season and the playoffs and get to a Stanley Cup final outside of Tampa Bay, to me, it's all like you got to prove it. And that goes
yeah,
for Carolina, that goes for Toronto, that goes for Florida. All those top teams have not been able to overcome Tampa. And until they do, Tampa's driving in the driver's seat.
yeah.
So,
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think, yeah, you almost by default, just because of what Tampa's done, even though they did not win the Stanley Cup final last year,
Mhm.
the fact that they still got back there, yeah, I guess by default they should be our number two. But maybe we'll save this for the biggest rise or teams to shuffle around segment. But
Mhm.
I just judging from opening night, Chris, and maybe just because of how they handled my Lightning, but New York is sneaky scary. The Rangers, just the way what I saw Tuesday night. If I was the
Yeah.
Metropolitan Division of the rest of the East, I'd be scared.
Yeah, like the Rangers, I like the Rangers. This is like the year where Alex Lafreniere and Capo Caco have got to take that next step. If they do, yeah, Rangers are they're going to be a big opponent for anybody.
Yeah,
And I think that's the rub on the Rangers right now. They have an all-world goalie. They have one of the best top lines in the league. They have insane talent and skill there. Where they start to fall off is on that bottom six. They have guys that can produce that just haven't yet.
yeah,
So it's like, okay, and they're young on those bottom six positions. And yeah, it's one of those things where it's like if those guys can take the next step, it doesn't have to be this ginormous leap, and it just has to be just better production, just a little bit better production. And yeah, Rangers could be a problem for people, but that's another one that's just like it could go either way for them. If they
yeah,
don't get that from your depth, you're going nowhere. You're
yeah.
going nowhere. So, but I do like that. At least that first game, anyway. They looked good. All right, let's kind of get into these middle, like the teens, our adolescent group here. Anybody kind of that middle column there, the 11 through 21. Um, Anybody jump out you that's in the wrong spot, in the right spot, or can make a move?
I and some people from Boston may not like this. I think the Bruins are a little too high. And on the other side of that, I think the Canucks are a little low. I think I would,
Bruins, Bruins at 13, by the way, and the
yeah,
Canucks are at 21. A lot of people are
yeah.
high on the Canucks, but yeah,
I just like what the Canucks did down the stretch last year. They have the coach now, Bruce Boudreau,
yeah,
and they have a lot of young talent there. And yeah, it's one of those situations too where if you could just get that talent to produce together at one and work as a team. I mean, it goes back to what you said before about the Rangers. It could go either way. And I think that
yeah,
applies to the Canucks because I think they have so much potential to, I'm not saying they're going to finish top five in the West, but I mean, I wouldn't rule it out if
right,
they did.
yeah,
And then the Bruins, I just feel like this is the last ride for them. I mean, you didn't have a very good season last year. You're bringing former players out of the woodworks. David Krejci came back from the Czech Republic out of retirement. So
yeah.
I don't know. I don't think they have the team to make the playoffs this year, especially coming out of the Atlantic. You're talking about battling the Leafs, the Lightning, and the Panthers for those spots, and then now you're banking on probably trying to get in through a wild card spot. And you look at some of the teams out of the East. I just think it's too tall of a task for a team like this, who is really on their last leg of that core.
Yeah, and we talked about Bruins in the beginning. They were the second wild card team in, and the distance between them and the Red Wings, which I'm pretty sure that was the team,
Yeah,
was so vast. Has everybody been? Can people close that gap? That's a big gap. So, is it a combination of those teams getting better and the Bruins just getting like another year older,
yeah,
which they just feel like they're the oldest team in the league, but they're not, believe
yeah,
it or not. Uh, yeah, they'll be an interesting team. I think people give the Bruins the benefit of the doubt because they're the Bruins, and it just
yeah,
seems like they're always there. They always seem to figure out a way to be relevant. So I'm not. I wasn't anticipating them starting any lower. I figured they'd be kind of right on where they are, and let's just see how the season works itself out, and we'll vote accordingly. Vancouver, you mentioned them. They're like the sexy pick, and they a team like them usually seems to be, and everybody wants to throw around they were on a 106-point pace if they had. I can't remember how people are wording it, but like if Boudreau had been there all season. They would have
Yeah.
had 100. Like you can't say that. Like that's not how it works. You have to just forget about that. And
Yeah.
because when he took over, were they out of it? No, but they had so much ground to make up.
Yeah.
You can't just say like, well, if he had been there all season. No, it's not how it works. So, but will they be better this year? Yeah, I definitely think they will be. I think they have he's the perfect coach for any team. That guy is amazing. But yeah, 21. I do think that is a little low for Vancouver to start off the power rankings. Maybe a few more up than that. I and this is like the interesting one. Look at where the Senators are.
Yeah.
Ottawa's at 15 to start the season, and a team that has just done next to nothing for which seems like 50 years, but has gotten better. Again, going back to the picks that we made, I have them as a wild card, man. I think they got very, very good and much more improved in the offseason. And watch out for the Senators for making some noise this year.
Yeah, they're definitely one of those teams. I did a crossover episode this offseason with the guys from Locked On Senators, and
Yeah.
there's mutual agreement all around. This team, they have been quietly getting better over the last couple of years. Obviously, the big move this past offseason was Alex DeBrincat. So,
Yep.
and you pair him up with Kachuk up there, that's going to be an interesting duo to watch. I mean, and another team that I feel like is just right in the same boat. And maybe I'm jumping a column real quick here, but over at 22, the Detroit Red Wings, I feel like those two teams are in the same boat too as well. Talk about two teams who, if the season starts out on the right foot, we're talking about two teams that could potentially shake up the whole dynamic of the Eastern Conference. And I mean more so in the fact that winning wild card spots.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Might be a big ask or a reach that they could take a division spot, but
Yeah.
yeah, the Red Wings should be improved, and the team right next to them at 23, the Devils,
Yeah.
should be improved. Like this is what I like. I like seeing this in the East. Like those teams that were at the bottom were just like, we got to get better, and that's been happening over the course of a handful of seasons. And now they're at the point where they can start making some waves. The Red Wings are definitely that team. The Devils are definitely that team. We talked about the Senators, um, even Buffalo. Buffalo's at
Yeah.
25 right now. I don't see them, really competing for a wild card spot, but I do see them competing a lot better and being in games and maybe upsetting some standings like late in the season. Like again, another Eastern team that I just feel like improved themselves and are no longer going to be looked at as kind of like a laughing stock. There's teams that have supplanted them as the laughing stock, but I don't think it's the Sabres anymore. I don't think it's the Red Wings anymore. And you like to see that, teams need to do things and
Yeah.
adjust and adapt and make moves. And you're seeing that the Red Wings, it seems like it's been going on for quite a while, but they're finally, I feel like, about to maybe move up some rankings. So those are three teams, the Red Wings, the Devils, and the Sabres coming at 22, 23, and 25. It'd be interesting to see where they are at the end of the season in these rankings.
Yeah, absolutely. Real quick, Chris,
Yep.
I didn't get to ask you who do you think's a little too high on this list?
Well, Vegas is always too high, no matter where they are.
I knew it from the minute you took that deep exhale. I knew where that was coming.
No, Vegas is at 18. I'm fine with them right there. I think that they're okay with it. Too high. Yeah, I'm kind of with you on the Bruins. And you know what, man? We'll go back even to the first column with St. Louis. I've kind of fallen out of favor a little bit with St. Louis. I think they were like high on everybody's lists. And I don't know. I just feel like the other teams in the division just they did a good, they picked up a good goalie with Husso.
Yeah.
Um, but I don't know, man. Like I just feel, no, he's gone, isn't he? Billy
Yeah,
Husso's gone.
he's in
He
Detroit, I
went to
believe.
Detroit, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
so they lost him.
So you're saying Detroit gets bumped up to 10, the Blues go to
Yeah,
22.
we'll swap a team a 12 spot difference. No, I don't know. I get it why some of these teams are where they are to start the season. Sometimes you give teams the benefit of the doubt, and I think that's true with St. Louis. But I think the Predators got better. Predators are at 12. I think the Predators are going to be easily a top 10 team. That's not saying much. They're 12, only 2 spots out. But by the end of the year, I would not surprise me. I think everybody thinks the Avalanche are going to win the division. I think the Predators could be the second team in that division. It's going to be a good division. It's going to be tight. But I think the Predators could be number 2. So, yeah, I think maybe early on, maybe St. Louis is a little bit too high.
Interesting. Yeah. Okay.
What about we'll kind of like look at the bottom dwellers here. Obviously, Arizona's at 32. The Blackhawks are at 31. The Flyers are at 30. And then keep going up. Sharks, Canadians, Kraken, 29, 28, 27. I think Coyotes and the Blackhawks are entrenched there all year long. I don't think they're getting out of there.
I think the Flyers are as well. I think the case, not right now, but I think the case within the next couple of weeks, and we'll see a steady rise. I think we'll see the Sharks break past the Kraken and, closer up to that 23, 24 spot. I just really like, they're kind of those teams. They're basically what I look at what like the Red Wings were a couple of years ago. Is there a lot of work that needs to be done? Yeah, but they're one of those teams that, they could surprise us like what we saw from the Ducks last year. I'm not saying they're going to make the playoffs, but I wouldn't be shocked if like they're 5 points out of it, heading into March.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm just not, I just think they're not heading in the right direction. I think they're going to stay there. I mean, I said like the bottom 2. You might be right with the Flyers at 3. And then I think between the Sharks and the Canadians, I think the Kraken are going to improve, man. They're at 27 right now. Well, why don't we kind of make a prediction right here? What one team will do the biggest riser and the biggest faller? So we have this one right here, and by the last graphic of the regular season, who will have made the biggest improvement?
For me, the biggest improvement will be the New Jersey Devils. I think by the end of the season, we'll see them around 14, 15, maybe 13. It really depends on what's going on in the Eastern Conference. For my biggest faller, I'm not crazy about this team. I've never really been crazy about them. And we hear kind of the same thing over again every year. They're going to be better. They're going to be better. It's the Minnesota Wild for me. I just don't see anything about this team. Yeah, you have Kaprizov, but I don't really see anything about this team that is just like jumps out to me as sexy enough to justify keeping yourself in the top 15. All the teams that we've spoken about already are teams that I really think are like just ready to burst out and kind of goes the same way for me for like the Capitals and the Bruins. It's just like I just feel like these teams are just, it's not so much they're going to have bad individual seasons. It's just you see the amount of talent about the NHL, what we've talked about in the beginning of this episode. There's such an even distribution of talent throughout the league for the most part. But, and I think these teams are going to fall victim to that.
The Central is interesting because, like I said, everybody has the Avalanche at number 1. And then it's a mixture between the Wild, the Blues, the Preds, and some people even throwing the Stars in there. You know? So there's some people that are having Minnesota at number 2, and there's other people that say they're getting the last wild card. So it's just throwing balls up in the air right now with the rest of the division as far as the Central goes. But I really like your pick on the Devils. Like I said, 23 with the Devils. They will definitely be, I think, substantially higher by the end of the season. But I am going to pick the Kraken here. I think the Kraken at 27. Again, I'm not going to predict they're going to make a playoff spot, but they could just miss out. And if they just miss out, let's say they're at 17 then. You know what I mean? That's a 10 team increase from the beginning of the year. That's positive. That's a positive. So I think Seattle is better than 27. But again, how we're saying we always put teams like St. Louis at 10 or even the Bruins at 13. We're putting teams like Seattle at 27 because we really don't have a lot to go on. And the little bit that we do have to go on was terrible.
Yeah.
So you're not going to put them any higher to start a season anyway. That is the ultimate, you got to prove it team to me right now. I think they can. I think they can improve that they're a little bit better. So I'll say Seattle moves up the most spots by the end of the season. And the team that moves down the most for me, you briefly mentioned them, and I think that's the Washington Capitals. Not big on the Caps this year, and some of it is who they have in goal, and that's Darcy Kemper. And I was I was a Kemper fan, but he definitely benefited from a all-world defense in front of him. There were times where he looked really good, and there were times where he looked really bad.
Yeah,
and I don't, the Capitals don't have the defense the Avalanche do. So he's gonna be asked to win more games in Washington than he was in Colorado. I don't know if he can do that. So I think it's going to be a struggle of a season for the Capitals, and just in terms of consistency. I don't think it's there. You have Ovechkin, who's the most consistent guy possibly ever. But from top to bottom, I think it's going to be a struggle for the Caps this year. So we shall see as this goes on. This is what you're going to get every Thursday, and including obviously any news and events that are going on around the league. Adam and I will bring them to you on the Thursday edition of Locked On NHL. So, you want to throw out your Stanley Cup prediction before? I mean, we're a couple games or a couple days into the season, so nobody's going to hold it against you because you say no, you're a homer because these two teams have played already. Big deal. They played one game. Throw it out there. What's your Stanley Cup prediction?
I'm going to say Avalanche and Rangers. Avalanche win in 6.
Okay. So you think the Lightning streak ends at getting to the Stanley Cup?
I think the Lightning get to the Eastern Conference Final again.
Oh, so we're going to have a repeat, just a different winner.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
it's hard not to pick the Avalanche. I mean, even though you host the show, it's hard not to,
They are just a damn good team. They are. I think their biggest opponent is going to be Calgary. So we'll see if they can get by them. So yeah, I mean, I got to put them in right now. And who they are playing, like I said, I picked them to go against Carolina. So, but I'm not like confident in that. So there's a lot of good teams in the East that could come out. So yeah, we'll see. All right. That's it, everybody. Thank you for tuning into the Thursday episode of Locked On NHL. It's always appreciated. And thank you for making this your first listen of the day. He's Mr. Adam Denker from Locked On Lightning. Be sure to check him out all season long on everything going on with the Tampa Bay Lightning. I'm Chris Maselli from Locked On Avalanche. And this is Locked On NHL Thursday edition Power Ranking. We're here all year. See you guys next week.